The snow had been falling since 4 in the afternoon. By midnight, it had buried the city. From the 43rd floor of the Voss Capitol Tower, Manhattan looked like something that had given up, white and soft and utterly still, every hard edge rounded into submission. The Hudson was invisible. The bridges were suggestions. Even the grid of streets below, that relentless mechanical logic that never quit, was gone, swallowed by 2 feet of silence. Clara Voss sat in her office and watched it happen. She had done this before, stayed past midnight, not because the work demanded it, but because the building became something else after hours. The architecture revealed itself, the glass that spent all day reflecting clouds and sun and the faces of people who wanted things from her became, at night, a kind of mirror turned inward. She could see herself in it. She wasn't always sure she liked what she saw. She was 38 years old, CEO of a company worth $4 billion, the youngest woman to run a firm of this size in the state, possibly the country. She had stopped counting the qualifiers 2 years ago because they had begun to feel like a cage built from compliments. She wore her dark hair short and her suits tailored and her expression calibrated to the precise degree of warmth that said, "I see you," without saying "I need you." She had learned this balance young. It had cost her things she didn't tally anymore. The office was all clean lines and restrained light. A single desk lamp threw amber across the glass surface of her desk, where 3 open folders waited for her signature. A merger document, 70 pages of due diligence, financial projections, legal language that amounted to a single, enormous gamble. Arcturus Holdings wanted Voss Capital. The board wanted the deal. The board had been very clear about what they wanted, the way boards always were clear in the way that didn't leave room for the word no without consequences. She had read the documents 4 times. Something felt wrong. She couldn't name it yet, which was the worst kind of wrong. At 11:40, she stood up from her desk, walked to the long leather sofa that sat against the interior wall, and lay down. She pulled a cashmere throw over herself. She arranged her breathing into something slow and even. She closed her eyes. She was not asleep. She had never been less asleep in her life. This was a thing she had started doing 3 years ago, after a consultant she'd hired to evaluate her leadership had told her something she'd carried ever since. You only see your organization's official face. You have no idea what it looks like when no one thinks you're watching. She'd fired the consultant for overstepping and then, alone in her car afterward, admitted that he was absolutely right. So she had developed the test. Simple, passive. A CEO, prone on a sofa, apparently unconscious, a building that still had people in it, night security, maintenance crew, a few programmers who kept strange hours, and a question, unspoken, hanging in the air above her. What does a person do when power isn't watching? Most of them did nothing notable. They walked past. A few slowed down. One junior analyst, 3 months ago, had paused long enough to take a photograph of her sleeping. She'd seen it afterward on his phone's camera roll during a technical review, a mistake he'd made by leaving the screen open. He'd been quietly moved to a role without client contact. Tonight, the building was quieter than usual. The storm had sent most people home early. The corridors had that particular emptiness that echoes carry through, every small sound amplified by all the space around it. She heard the elevator at 11:58. Footsteps, deliberate, unhurried. Work boots on polished concrete. A sound she'd come to recognize. Not the dress shoes of finance people, not the silent sneakers of tech staff, but something heavier. Someone who walked like they were paying attention to the floor beneath them. She kept her breathing even. The footsteps entered the corridor outside her office. They paused. Through her lashes barely open, just enough she could see the door. It was ajar. The figure that appeared in the doorway was a man, tall, wearing the gray utility jacket of the building's maintenance staff. He held a clipboard in one hand and a small flashlight in the other, though he hadn't switched it on. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking into the room. She expected him to leave. He didn't. He stepped inside, slowly, the way people do when they're trying not to disturb something. He crossed to the environmental control panel near the window, a small panel, mostly decorative, that she'd never once interacted with, and looked at it for a moment. Then he opened a small access hatch beneath it and studied what was inside. She heard him make a quiet sound. Not quite a word. The sound a person makes when they've confirmed something they suspected. He reset something inside the panel. There was a click, barely audible, and then the hiss of the ventilation system changed the faint draft she'd barely registered. As the room's baseline air shifted, softened, lost its edge. She hadn't even consciously noticed the cold until it stopped. He closed the hatch. He stood, looked at her at the sofa, at the figure beneath the throw that was clearly insufficient for the temperature the room had apparently reached. He set his clipboard down on the nearest surface with extraordinary care, making no sound at all. He removed his jacket. He was wearing a flannel shirt beneath it, dark blue, worn soft. He crossed the room and laid the jacket over her, over the throw, adding a layer with the same meticulous care, tucking it around her shoulders, not touching her, just arranging, and then he stood back. He stood in the quiet for a moment. The snow fell outside. 43 floors below, nothing moved. The city had stopped. He spoke, not to her, or not exactly. The way a person speaks when they think they are alone, or when alone is all they have ever really been. Couldn't keep her warm that night, he said. Barely a sound, barely language at all. I was 17 minutes late. The heat had been out for hours, and he stopped. The room held the silence. I won't be late again, he said. I promised Emma I won't be late again. He picked up his clipboard. He walked out of the room. His footsteps faded down the corridor. The elevator came. The doors closed. He was gone. Clara Voss lay on the sofa with his jacket over her shoulders and did not move for a long time. She had tested hundreds of people with this. Not one of them had ever left her warmer. She found his personnel file the next morning. Daniel Hayes, 34 years old. 2 years with the building's facilities management contractor, which meant 2 years inside this tower without her ever once registering his